Hello, everyone. Did you know that throughout the history of the United States, there have been many brilliant and visionary presidents who helped shape the world's leading superpower? Names like George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Franklin D. Roosevelt, Thomas Jefferson. But while we often celebrate the greats, we tend to forget about the other side of history, the leaders who failed to rise to the challenge. In this video, we're diving into the stories of the 10 worst presidents in American history. Who were they? What went wrong? And how did their leadership impact the nation? Let's find out together. President James Buchanan. President James Buchanan, 1857 to 1861, is widely regarded as the worst president in U.S. history due to his weak leadership and lack of decisiveness. During his time in office, the 15th president failed to take a firm stand against Southern states' secessionist ambitions, which ultimately led to America's bloodiest Civil War. He also showed poor leadership as the nation slipped into economic recession under his watch. More specifically, Buchanan supported the Supreme Court's decision to deny citizenship rights to enslaved people and openly backed the institution of slavery. His stance outraged many Democratic lawmakers, triggering deep divisions within the party and accelerating the march toward civil war. President Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson, the 17th President of the United States, 1865-1869, is frequently ranked among the 10 worst presidents in American history. Following the Civil War, Johnson sided with white Southerners and actively opposed the expansion of civil rights for African Americans in the Southern states. While he did formally abolish slavery, he showed little concern for the rights and welfare of formerly enslaved people. As a result, his presidency hindered racial progress during the critical Reconstruction period. President Franklin Pierce. Franklin Pierce, the 14th President of the United States, 1853 to 1857, is also widely seen as one of the figures who helped ignite the American Civil War. A handsome former Mexican-American war veteran, Pierce took office with great enthusiasm, but his stance on slavery only deepened national divisions. He was a strong supporter of the Missouri Compromise of 1820, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, all of which upheld or expanded slavery. These laws intensified tensions across the country. In the North, anti-slavery sentiment was growing rapidly, while in the South, most people refused to acknowledge any moral wrongdoing and fought hard to preserve the institution of slavery. Pierce's support for pro-slavery policies is considered by many historians as a major contributing factor to the national crisis that followed. President Millard Fillmore. Millard Fillmore, the 13th President of the United States, 1850 to 1853, came to power unexpectedly after President Zachary died just over a year into his term. One of Fillmore's most significant mistakes was his support for the Compromise of 1850, particularly the Fugitive Slave Act. He signed into law a measure that allowed the federal government to capture and return escaped slaves to their owners, even from free states. This decision deeply angered abolitionists in the North and is considered by many historians as a key factor that fueled the rising tensions leading to the Civil War. President John Tyler. John Tyler, the 10th President of the United States, 1841 to 1845, was the first vice president in American history to assume the presidency due to the death of a sitting president. He took office after President William Henry Harrison died of pneumonia just 30 days after his inauguration. As a U.S. Senator, Tyler had built his political career by opposing federal tax plans, supporting the rights of slaveholding states, resisting the national bank's power, and defending South Carolina's right to secede. However, once he became president, he reversed many of his earlier positions, leading to widespread backlash. His actions caused the entire cabinet, originally appointed under President Harrison, to resign, leaving Tyler politically isolated. He struggled to maintain his authority and was forced to rebuild a new cabinet from scratch just to keep his administration functioning. Tyler's presidency is often remembered for its political instability and contradiction. President Ulysses S. Grant. Ulysses S. Grant, President of the United States from 1869 to 1877, was a former Union general during the Civil War, widely respected for his military leadership, but often ranked among the 10 worst U.S. presidents due to his troubled administration. During his presidency, Grant failed to control widespread corruption within his government. Numerous scandals involving cabinet members and federal officials tarnished his legacy and eroded public trust. Though admired for his service to the Union, his time in the White House is often remembered for poor leadership and lack of oversight. President William Henry Harrison. Before becoming the 9th President of the United States in 1841, William Henry Harrison was a well-known military leader, celebrated for his role in the Battle of Tippecanoe in 1811. Despite not being a particularly popular candidate, he won the presidency in the 1840 election. On Inauguration Day, the weather was cold and windy, yet Harrison chose to deliver the longest inaugural address in U.S. history, lasting over 1 hour and 40 minutes, without wearing a coat or hat. Shortly after, he caught a cold that developed into pneumonia, and just 1 month into his presidency, Harrison died. He holds the record as the shortest-serving president in American history. President Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon, the 37th President of the United States, 1969 to 1974, achieved several notable successes during his time in office. He played a crucial role in establishing diplomatic relations with China and secured a strategic arms reduction agreement with the Soviet Union, marking major milestones in Cold War diplomacy. However, his presidency is also remembered for serious controversies. Under Nixon's leadership, the United States became increasingly entangled in the Vietnam War, a conflict that deeply divided the nation. More damaging was his administration's involvement in political espionage against anti-war movements and his political opponents, particularly the Democratic Party. An FBI agent named G. Gordon Liddy, who served as a financial advisor for Nixon's re-election campaign committee, was given $250,000 to carry out a series of covert operations, including spying and sabotage. The most infamous of these was the break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. Nixon's team bugged phones, stole documents, and attempted to cover it all up. It remains a permanent stain on his legacy and a symbol of corruption and betrayal at the highest level of government. President Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover, the 31st President of the United States, 1929 to 1933, ranks 9th among the worst presidents in American history. Before entering politics, Hoover was a renowned mining engineer and a respected humanitarian leader. As Secretary of Commerce under Presidents Warren Harding and Calvin Coolidge, he championed economic modernization and gained popularity. In the 1928 presidential election, he easily secured the Republican nomination and won the presidency. However, Hoover's challenges began almost immediately with the stock market crash of 1929, marking the onset of the Great Depression during his very first year in office. Despite efforts to address the crisis through various policies, his response was largely seen as ineffective. Historians generally agree that his failure to resolve the economic collapse, and arguably making it worse, was a key reason for his loss in the 1932 election. Additionally, his support for prohibition, banning the manufacture and sale of alcohol, drew widespread public backlash. Many Americans also criticized Hoover for being overly conservative, rigid in decision-making, and poor in public communication. These factors led to a dramatic loss of public trust, and Hoover was decisively defeated by Franklin D. Roosevelt, who went on to reshape the country during one of its darkest eras. President Zachary Taylor. Ranked 10th among the worst U.S. presidents is Zachary Taylor, the 12th President of the United States. While some considered him a moderate political figure, his time in office was brief and controversial. Born in Virginia and raised in Kentucky, Taylor was a brave and decorated military leader, having served with distinction in the War of 1812 and the Mexican-American War. Though he had little interest in politics, the Whig Party nominated him as their presidential candidate in 1848, largely because of his strong opposition to secession. Taylor won the election, defeating Democratic candidate Lewis Cass, and became the first U.S. president with no prior political or administrative experience. He was also the first and only president elected from Louisiana, and the last Southerner to win the presidency until Woodrow Wilson in 1916. Despite his military reputation, Taylor was frequently mocked by the public as being unrefined and more interested in promoting his image than developing firm political policies. Some historians believe that his lack of strong political direction contributed to the growing tensions that eventually led to the Civil War in the 1850s. Sadly, Taylor died suddenly of cholera after eating a bowl of cherries with cold milk, having served just over 1 year in office. Had he lived longer, some speculate he might have helped prevent the bloody conflict that followed. Out of all the presidents we've just covered, James Buchanan, Andrew Johnson, Franklin Pierce, Millard Fillmore, John Tyler, Ulysses S. Grant, William Henry Harrison, Richard Nixon, Herbert Hoover, and Zachary Taylor. Who do you think had the worst legacy in U.S. presidential history? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your take. Please comment below the video what you're thinking. Thank you for watching this video. If you like it and think about it, please give me a like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Sincerely thank you and see you again.